The distress signal came through space like a scream, and Commander Lisa Hayes was not happy about it at all. She stood on the bridge of her ship called the Defiant, with her arms crossed tight against her chest, and stared at the alien message that had interrupted her morning coffee for the third time in just 1 hour. The computer was trying to translate the strange language, but it was having trouble, and kept spitting out pieces of desperate words, mixed with things that sounded like old myths and legends. Lieutenant Amy Chen sat at the communications station, and her fingers moved fast across the glowing displays in front of her, and she looked up at Lisa with concern in her eyes. The signal keeps repeating over and over again with the same pattern, and they are calling for something they call the Iron Blood Warriors to answer their call. Lisa rubbed her temples because she was getting a headache from all this noise and interruption to her peaceful morning. We are not warriors at all because we are just a research and exploration ship that studies rocks and takes nice pictures of space clouds and nebulas. But the signal would not stop no matter what they did. And when the video feed finally became clear enough to see, Lisa felt her irritation change into something between fascination and complete disbelief at what she was seeing. The woman on the screen was so beautiful that it seemed impossible, and her features were too perfect to be from any human world. Her ears were pointed and swept back from a face that had sharp angles, and her eyes looked like liquid silver, and they stared right into the camera with such desperate intensity that it made Lisa feel uncomfortable. Behind the woman and through all the smoke and chaos of what looked like a terrible battlefield, something massive and reptilian moved through the darkness with scales that caught the light. The woman spoke, and her voice had strange harmonics that made everyone on the bridge feel a weird ache in their heads. I am Alindra of the Starweave Sanctuary, and our realm is burning right now, and the Void Swarm has broken through our final defenses, and I know that humans do not get involved in galactic conflicts, and I know you find our wars boring and tedious, but please, we are dying here. The dragon behind her let out a roar that was so loud it made the camera shake, and Alindra put her hand on what looked like the giant creature scales, as if drawing strength from touching it. The swarm does not stop ever, and it does not negotiate with anyone, and once we fall, they will find your worlds next, so I am begging you to send anyone or send anything that can help us. Then the transmission just cut to static and went black. Lisa stared at the empty screen for what felt like a very long time, and around her the bridge crew waited in complete silence because nobody knew what to say. Lisa finally spoke and told Lieutenant Katie Morgan to plot a course to those coordinates right away. Katie looked confused, and her hands stopped moving over the navigation console as she asked if Lisa was sure about this. Our orders from Command are to complete the survey of the Theta Quadrant, and Command will not authorize us to go off course like this. Lisa interrupted her before she could finish talking. Then we will ask for forgiveness instead of permission, because that woman is right about one thing, and if we do not stop this swarm at their world, then we will be fighting it at our own worlds. Later, Lisa pulled up her personal communication device and began typing a message to Fleet Admiral Beth Rodriguez back at headquarters, because that woman is right, and I am far too irritated right now to let some cosmic horror ruin my coffee time ever again. The Defiant turned on its axis, and the engines flared to life with bright blue light, and around them space itself seemed to warp and stretch as the ship jumped into faster-than-light travel. None of them had any idea that they were about to enter a war that had already consumed 17 different civilizations across the galaxy. Lisa sat back in her command chair and thought about what they were flying into, and she wondered if this was the right choice. But deep down, she knew that leaving those people to die was not something she could do. Amy kept monitoring the distress signal even as they traveled and reported that it was getting stronger, which meant they were getting closer to the source. Katie worked on calculating the exact arrival point and making sure they would not jump right into the middle of a battle without any warning. The crew moved around the bridge with practiced efficiency, And even though they were just scientists and researchers, they all understood that something important was happening. Lisa thought about Elindra and her dragon, and wondered what kind of civilization could grow such creatures and use magic that seemed to defy all known science. She also thought about the swarm, and what kind of enemy could push such powerful beings to the point of begging strangers for help. The ship hummed around them as it cut through space at speeds that bent reality itself, and Lisa knew that in just a few hours they would arrive at the Starweave Sanctuary. She stood up and walked to the view screen and stared out at the streaking stars. "Get ready, everyone, because when we drop out of light speed, I want all sensors active and all defensive systems online, just in case." The crew acknowledged her orders and began preparations. Lisa returned to her chair and picked up her cold coffee and took a sip, even though it tasted terrible now. She smiled slightly because somehow even bad coffee was better than no coffee at all. Amy spoke up again and said that she was picking up more signals now, and they were all coming from the same area, and they all sounded like battle communications. Katie announced that they would arrive in 30 minutes. Lisa took a deep breath and prepared herself for whatever they were about to face. The Defiant raced through space toward a war zone and toward people who needed help desperately, and Lisa Hayes decided right then that being irritated was better than being useless. The Starweave Sanctuary was dying in front of their eyes. When the Defiant dropped out of faster-than-light travel, the crew got their first real look at what the Void Swarm had done to this place. What had once been a beautiful space station that looked organic in design and seemed to be grown rather than built with spiraling towers made of living crystal was now a burning wreck floating in space. There were massive tears in the hull that leaked atmosphere and bodies into the empty void of space. But what made Lisa feel her blood run cold were the creatures that were attacking the station. They looked like someone had taken a spider and made it the size of a house, and then removed anything that could be considered natural or normal. Their black shell reflected no light at all, and they had too many legs that moved in ways that hurt to watch. They were everywhere and crawling over the station like a living carpet made of nightmares. Amy reported from her station that she was scanning the area, and her voice was shaking slightly as she spoke. "I am reading approximately 40,000 individual swarm units on the station, and they are biological, but with machine parts added to them, and they are eating the station, and I mean literally consuming it." Lisa demanded to know if there were any survivors down there. Amy checked her readings and said she was detecting life signs in the central sanctuary dome, and maybe 300 individuals were still alive, and something really big was with them. Through the main view screen, they all watched as a section of the station exploded outward in a burst of fire and debris. From the breach, something emerged that made the swarm creatures look tiny by comparison. The dragon was both magnificent and terrible to see. Its scales shifted between emerald green and sapphire blue and caught the light of the dying station in beautiful ways. Wings that could have wrapped around the Defiant twice over spread wide and trailed cosmic fire behind them. Riding on the back of this massive creature with her silver hair streaming behind her like a war banner was Elindra. She was fighting with magic that should not exist according to all human science. Bolts of pure stellar energy shot from her hands, and each one vaporized dozens of swarm creatures instantly. The dragon breathed fire that looked like nuclear explosions and turned entire sections of the enemy into nothing but ash. But for every 100 creatures they killed, 1,000 more poured from the darkness beyond the station. Katie whispered from the navigation station that they were losing this battle. Lisa set her jaw in a hard line and called out to the tactical station, "Lieutenant Claire Barnes, what is our weapons status right now?" Claire looked up from her console with surprise, clear on her face. "Commander, we are a research vessel and we have defensive rail guns and some torpedo tubes, but we are not equipped for actual combat like this." Lisa did not let her finish. "I did not ask about what we do not have, and I asked about what we do have available." A slow smile spread across Claire's face as she understood. What Lisa was asking. Our railguns can be loaded with survey probes that we can modify to explode, and torpedo tubes can launch pretty much anything that fits inside them, and we have a lot of scientific equipment that was never meant to be weaponized, but could be if someone was creative enough about it. Lisa nodded and told her to get creative right now. I want those swarm things off that station in the next 5 minutes. Claire said yes, Commander, and turned back to her console with excitement in her eyes. The Defiant dove into the battle, and the swarm was about to learn something new about humans that day. When properly irritated, humans could be absolutely terrifying in a fight. The ship moved through space with incredible agility that seemed impossible for its size. Claire began firing modified survey probes that had been rigged with high-yield explosives. Each probe turned into a cluster bomb that carved bloody holes in the swarm formations. Katie maneuvered the ship with skill and used the debris field as cover, while Claire kept firing magnetic tethers that were meant for capturing asteroid samples, became whips that grabbed swarm creatures and flung them into each other with deadly force. Even the sensor dish was weaponized by focusing a beam of radiation that fried the swarm neural systems. The crew worked together like they had trained for combat their whole lives, even though they were just scientists. Lisa watched as Elindra and her dragon fought alongside them, and she could see the elf woman was surprised by how the humans were fighting. Amy called out that 3 swarm cruisers had just warped into the area. To reinforce the attack, Lisa told Katie to lure them into the debris field near the old fuel depot. Katie grinned and said she understood the plan. The Defiant raced toward the debris field with the 3 cruisers following close behind. When they were in position, Claire fired at the fuel depot, and it exploded in a massive fireball. The 3 cruisers were caught in the blast and turned into twisted metal. Lisa opened a communication channel to Elindra. Your dragon can. He moved the civilians to the evacuation point at grid coordinates, 77 Delta. Elindra sounded startled by the direct question. Yes, we can do that, but we must hold the sanctuary core or everything will be lost. Lisa interrupted her. We will hold it and get your people to safety now, and that is an order. Elindra tried to argue. You cannot order me because I am a sovereign leader of my people. Lisa sighed in frustration. Look, elf lady, I have had maybe 3 hours of sleep and my coffee is cold, and there are space spiders eating a space station, and I do not have time for a rank discussion right now, so move your civilians or we are all going to die here. And I refuse to die before I have had decent coffee. Despite everything that was happening, Elindra found herself laughing, and it was a sound she had not made in months, as you command irritated human. The dragon named Silverix banked hard and dove toward the sanctuary core. Below them, the Defiant positioned itself between the swarm and the evacuation point. Lisa ordered all weapons to fire at maximum rate. The small human ship opened fire with everything it had and created a wall of destruction. Then more human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. 3 ships appeared, then 5 more. Then a whole dozen. A new voice came over the communication channel. This is the Perseverance, and Admiral Rodriguez sends her regards and says to tell Commander Hayes that she is still irritated at being woken up early, but she is more irritated at space bugs than anything else. All ships are authorized for weapons free, so let's clean house. The tide of the battle began to turn in their favor. Elindra had lived for 3,000 years and had seen stars born and die. In that time, she had fought in wars that started before humans had even discovered fire. In all those long years, she had never seen anything quite like what the humans were doing right now. The Defiant moved through the swarm formations like a dancer with impossible agility for a ship its size. The human weapons were crude by galactic standards because they were just kinetic. Projectiles and explosive devices that relied on simple chemical reactions, but the humans used them with surgical precision and absolutely no hesitation at all. Survey probes that had been modified with high-yield explosives turned into cluster munitions that carved bloody holes in swarm formations. With devastating effect, Magnetic tethers meant for capturing asteroid samples became whips that grabbed swarm creatures and flung them into each other at high speed. Even the sensor dish had been weaponized and was focusing a beam of radiation that fried swarm neural systems. What amazed Elindra most was the human fighting style. The swarm was used to enemies who fought with honor and who followed the ancient codes of galactic warfare that had been established millions of years ago. The humans apparently had never heard of those codes, or more likely simply did not care about them at all. They attacked from blind spots where the swarm could not see them coming. They used the debris from the destroyed station as cover to hide behind. When 3 swarm cruisers warped in to reinforce the attack, the humans did not engage them in direct combat. Instead, they lured the cruisers into a debris field and then detonated a fuel depot, which turned the entire battlefield into a killing zone. Elindra pressed her hand against Silveric's scales and felt his ancient consciousness brush against hers with warmth. The dragon was enjoying this fight because it reminded him of battles from his youth thousands of years ago. Lisa's voice crackled over the communication channel again. "Your dragon, can it move the civilians to the evacuation point at Grid 77 Delta?" Elindra blinked in surprise. At the direct question, she communicated silently with Silverix through their mental bond. "Yes, we can do that, but we must hold the sanctuary core or the entire station will collapse." Lisa interrupted before she could finish explaining. "We will hold it, so get your people to safety, and that is an order." Elindra tried to protest. "You cannot order me around because I am a leader of my civilization." Lisa sounded frustrated and tired. "Look, elf lady, I have had maybe 3 hours of sleep and my coffee is cold and there are space spiders eating a space station. I do not have time for a rank discussion right now. Move your civilians, or we are all going to die here, and I absolutely refuse to die before I have had decent coffee." Despite everything happening around her and all the death and destruction and the end of her civilization, Elindra found herself laughing. It was a sound she had not made in months, and it felt strange but good. "As you command, irritated human," she said with genuine warmth in her voice. Silverix banked hard and dove toward the sanctuary core where the remaining civilians were huddled in fear. Below them, the Defiant positioned itself between the massive swarm force and the evacuation point. Elindra watched in amazement as the small human ship opened fire with everything it had. The humans created a wall of destruction that nothing could pass through. Then something wonderful happened. 3 more human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and appeared in the battle space. Then 5 more ships appeared. Then a whole dozen ships materialized around them. A new voice came over the communication channel, and it belonged to another human commander. "This is the Perseverance, and Admiral Rodriguez sends her regards and says to tell Commander Hayes that she is still irritated at being woken up early, but the Admiral is more irritated at space bugs than anything else right now. All ships, you are authorized for weapons free, so let's clean house and save these people." The human fleet spread out and began engaging the swarm with coordinated precision. Elindra had seen many fleets fight in her long life, but never like this. The humans moved like a school of fish, all turning and diving together. Their weapons fire was constant and relentless. They showed no mercy to the swarm and gave no quarter. Silverix carried the civilians in groups, using his massive claws gently despite their size. Each trip took only minutes because the dragon could fly faster than most small ships. The civilians were terrified at first, but they trusted Elindra, and she assured them they were safe. As Elindra made the 3rd evacuation run, she saw something that made her heart soar with hope. The swarm was retreating. Not in an organized fashion, but in panic and chaos. The human fleet had killed so many of them that the swarm hive mind was recognizing this was a losing battle. The remaining swarm creatures fled into the darkness of space. The human ships pursued them and made sure they kept running. Lisa's voice came over the channel again, but this time she sounded tired but satisfied. All civilian transports report, when you are clear of the station, we need to make sure everyone is safe before we stand down. Elindra landed Silverix on the last remaining platform of the sanctuary. She dismounted and walked to the edge where she could see the human ships, patrolling the area. Katie's voice came through from the Defiant commander. All civilian transports report. They are clear and heading to the designated safe zone, Lisa acknowledged, and then ordered all ships to form a defensive perimeter. Elindra activated her communication device and spoke directly to Lisa Commander Hayes. I do not know how to thank you properly. You came when no one else would, and you saved my people. When the entire galaxy had abandoned us, Lisa was quiet for a moment before responding. You said please, and that counts for something in my book. Besides, I was too irritated to let space bugs win. Elindra smiled at that response. She looked at Silverix, who was resting his massive head on the platform. The dragon consciousness touched hers with a feeling of contentment. They had survived. Her people were safe, and they had found the most unlikely allies in the entire galaxy, humans who fought with crude weapons and bad coffee, but who had hearts brave enough to answer a desperate call for help. The swarm primary hive ship arrived, just as the last of the civilian transports fled to safety. It was massive and larger than anything the humans had brought to the battle. A twisted cathedral of black shell and void touched metal that seemed to drink in the light of nearby stars. Elindra felt her heart sink as the enormous vessel materialized at the edge of the battlefield. All ships fall back. Now came Lisa, voice cutting through all the communication channels. Get those civilians out of here, and we will buy you the time you need. Elindra responded immediately with a firm no. She guided Silverix alongside the Defiant so the dragon was flying right next to the human. Ship, we fight together, she said with determination. This is not your fight anymore because you have done enough and your people are safe now, Lisa argued. But Elindra interrupted her Commander Hayes for months. We begged the galaxy for help, and every civilization we called allies turned away from us. They said the swarm was our problem and that we had brought this upon ourselves by settling too far into the dark regions of space. And then you came with your crude weapons and your terrible coffee and your complete disregard for how battles are supposed to be fought. Elindra paused and watched as Silverix's scales began to glow with building power. This is very much my fight, and I will not abandon you after you came to help us. Lisa was quiet for a moment, and Elindra could almost hear her thinking. Then Lisa asked a strange question. Your dragon, how hot can he burn? Silverix's consciousness touched Elindra's mind and showed her memories of stars consumed and of suns born from his ancient fire. Hot enough to melt a moon, she replied with certainty. Good, because I have a really stupid idea, and it is going to require a lot of heat. The plan Lisa explained was completely insane. It violated at least 17 laws of stellar physics that Elindra knew about, and probably broke a few laws of common sense as well. But as Lisa talked through the details, Elindra found herself grinning, despite how dire their circumstances were. The human ships formed a perimeter around the massive hive ship, but they did not attack it directly. Instead, they began deploying every probe and every sensor buoy and every piece of equipment they had available. They created a network in space, like a cage made of magnetic fields and gravitational lenses that all focused on a single point. At that point, Silverix positioned himself in empty space and began to burn with power. He drew upon energy that had slept in his core for millennia. Fire that had forged worlds in the early days of the universe came forth from deep within him. The human equipment captured that dragon fire and focused it through their technological systems. They amplified the heat through resonance frequencies that should have been impossible, but somehow the human math made it work. The hive ship realized what was happening, but it was too late to escape. The concentrated beam of dragon fire, amplified through human ingenuity, punched through the hive ship shields like they were not even there. It burned through layer after layer of armor plating. It melted through the swarm. Command Nexus, where the hive mind controlled everything. It cut through the quantum drives that powered the massive vessel and kept it in space. And then the beam hit the antimatter containment pods deep in the ship core. The explosion that followed was visible from 3 star systems away. When the light finally faded, the hive ship was completely gone. Nothing remained except scattered debris and cosmic dust. Most of the swarm forces were also destroyed in the blast. The few creatures that remained fled into the darkness, and they scattered in all directions. The Starweave sanctuary was saved at last, but as Elindra surveyed all the damage around her, she could not help but weep. She looked at the shattered remains of her once beautiful home. The spiraling crystal towers were broken and melted. The organic architecture that had taken centuries to grow was now dead. Silverix wrapped a protective wing around her small form and shared her deep sorrow through their mental bond. "We won," she whispered. But the cost was so high, Lisa's voice came through the communication channel, and it was tired but gentle. "Yeah, war always costs more than you want to pay. But you are alive and your people are alive. From where I am sitting, that is definitely worth celebrating." Elindra looked at the Defiant floating nearby, this small, battered research vessel that had changed everything for her people. "Why did you come?" she asked with genuine curiosity. "Your admiral could have refused the mission, and you had no obligation to help us at all." Lisa's laugh was dry but warm. "You want the truth, then I was irritated, plain and simple. I had been chasing boring rocks for 6 months and drinking terrible coffee and doing nothing interesting at all. Then you show up broadcasting about space bugs and the end of civilization, and I thought, well, at least it will not be boring." Elindra could not believe what she was hearing. "That is it?" she asked. "Just irritation made you risk everything. Never underestimate how much humans can accomplish when they are properly annoyed." Lisa replied. "Plus, you said please, and that counts for something important." Elindra wiped the tears from her silver eyes. She looked at Silverix, who rumbled his agreement with the human philosophy. Around them, the human fleet began rescue operations. They searched through the debris for any remaining survivors. They established medical stations for the wounded. They shared their supplies freely with the refugees. Admiral Rodriguez's ship, the Perseverance, moved closer, and the Admiral herself appeared on the video channel. "We are setting up temporary habitats for your people, and we have engineering crews ready to help rebuild. Lisa was right to come help you, and I am glad she did, even if she did wake me up early." Elindra felt overwhelming gratitude toward these strange humans. They had lost nothing in this fight except time and resources. They had gained no territory and no wealth. They had simply helped, because it was the right thing to do. That was something the ancient galactic civilizations had forgotten long ago. Elindra made a decision right then. She would forge an alliance with humanity that would last forever. Together, they would face whatever threats came from the darkness, and they would do it with terrible coffee and no respect for proper protocols. 3 weeks after the Great Battle, the Starweave sanctuary had been partially rebuilt with help from the humans. Human engineering crews worked alongside Elindra people every single day. They combined the crystalline bioarchitecture of the elves with human durability and practical design. The result was something completely new and different, a fusion of 2 very different civilizations working together. Elindra stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed diplomatic station. She watched as more human ships arrived, bringing supplies and prefabricated structures. Most importantly, they brought coffee, because apparently Commander Hayes had made it a condition of the alliance. Admiral Beth Rodriguez joined Elindra at the large window overlooking space. "The Galactic Council is calling for a session," the Admiral said with a slight smile. "They want to discuss what they are calling the human intervention in our internal matter." Elindra smiled back at her new friend. "Let me guess," she said, "they are irritated with us." Beth laughed out loud at that. Oh, they are absolutely furious right now. Apparently, we violated about 40 different protocols by engaging the swarm without council authorization. There is talk of sanctions against humanity. Elindra asked what Beth intended to do about the council complaints. Probably tell them exactly where they can stick their protocols, Beth said cheerfully. We saved an entire civilization from extinction. If they have a problem with that, they can file a complaint. I will read it eventually, or maybe I will not. Silverix landed on the platform outside the observation deck. His massive form was somehow gentle despite his incredible size. He looked at Elindra through the transparent aluminum window. His warm consciousness brushed against her mind with affection. The humans are strange. He communicated directly to her thoughts. They follow no traditions at all. They respect no ancient ways. They fight like chaos given physical form. Elindra replied silently through their mental bond. I know they are different, Silverix added with what could only be described as deep amusement. I like them very much. Commander Lisa Hayes approached, carrying 3 steaming mugs in her hands. She handed one to Beth and one to Elindra with a grin. I had them synthesize your people's ceremonial tea. Lisa said, I figured you might appreciate having some. Elindra took a sip and nearly spat it out immediately. This is coffee, not tea, she protested. Lisa grinned even wider. Yeah, but it is coffee, made with your tea leaves mixed in. Call it a cultural fusion drink. Do you hate it? Elindra admitted it was terrible. Then after another sip, she said, but also somehow, perfect. The 3 of them stood together in companionable silence. They watched as human and elf crews worked side by side to rebuild what the swarm had destroyed. The galaxy will never accept this alliance, Elindra said quietly. They will see it as a threat to their power. 2 civilizations that refuse to follow the old rules, Lisa replied with confidence. Good, then let them be irritated about it. We will be too busy actually doing something useful to care what they think. Beth added that the swarm will return eventually. This was only one hive ship, and there are hundreds more in the dark regions of space. Then we will fight them, Lisa said simply, together with terrible coffee and no respect for proper military protocol. Elindra looked at the dragon and at the humans and at the impossible fusion of magic and science that surrounded her on all sides. 3,000 years of life, and she had never imagined something like this alliance. You know, the ancient prophecies spoke of an alliance that would change the galaxy, she said slowly. Warriors of iron and blood standing beside the star-touched ones. We always thought it meant something grand and noble and ceremonial. Lisa laughed at that, and instead, you got us, she said, a bunch of irritated scientists who just wanted to finish their coffee in peace. Elindra smiled warmly and raised her terrible coffee-tea fusion in a toast. I would not trade it for anything in the universe. Outside the window, Silverix roared his agreement. The sound echoed across the rebuilt sanctuary and into deep space. In the broad darkness beyond the station, the swarm retreated further. They had learned a valuable lesson about disturbing humanity. Never interrupt their coffee time. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when that mistake was made. In the days and weeks that followed, the human Starweave alliance grew stronger. More human ships arrived with supplies and personnel. More elf refugees returned to help rebuild their home. The 2 species learned from each other. Humans learned about magic and energy manipulation. Elves learned about practical engineering and creative problem-solving. Together they built something neither could have achieved alone. Elindra spent her days working with human engineers. Silverix enjoyed flying patrol missions with human fighter pilots. Lisa stayed on as the primary liaison between the 2 civilizations. The Galactic Council sent angry messages every day. The humans ignored most of them. When the Council threatened sanctions, Beth simply replied that they were welcome to try. The truth was that the Council feared what this alliance represented. For millions of years, they had maintained power through ancient rules and careful neutrality. Now, two civilizations had broken those rules and won a major victory. Other oppressed species began sending messages to the alliance. They asked for help against their own threats. Some asked to join the alliance themselves. The old order was changing, and the Council could not stop it. Elindra met with representatives from a dozen different species. She listened to their stories of abandonment by the Council. She promised to bring their concerns to the alliance leadership Lisa and Beth worked on, establishing formal alliance protocols. They created a charter based on mutual aid and respect. Any species could join if they agreed to help defend others. The only requirement was a commitment to actually show up when called. It was the opposite of the Council bureaucratic approach. Within 2 months, 5 more species had joined. Within 6 months, the number grew to 20. The alliance became a real power in the galaxy, and at its heart were the irritated humans and the grateful elves, working together with terrible coffee and ancient magic, fighting for those who could not fight for themselves. The swarm watched from the darkness. They were planning their return. But now they faced not one weak civilization. They faced an alliance that would not break, and that made all the difference in the universe.